Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. And in this video, we're just going to keep continuing our series called Life Lessons from the Bank. So, what is this series about? Basically, we just observe institutional behaviors from the bank and see how we can apply it in our own lives, right? And there's a saying that banks have the tallest buildings in every downtown North America. And I don't think that's an accident, right? So, here's today's life lesson. House standards and don't work with most people. And I know this might seem shocking, right? Because people always preach this message of like, you got to work with anybody and everybody. And I think what happens to most people is that they end up tired and broken with nothing at all. Like you try to make friends with everybody and add like 1,000 people in your Facebook, and none of them are, let's say, quote, productive, if that's the right word. You're just going to end up tired and miserable, right? Now, here's a crazy thing about a crazy statistic I've heard, but I can't find a source for it. I heard that 90% of the people in this country don't qualify for a mortgage, right? And so, by that standard, banks have pretty much eliminated most people from their lending pool, right? So, you think like, oh man, banks take advantage of everybody. Maybe in a sense that is true, right? But when it comes to let's say mortgages, we'll just say use mortgages for now, they only take advantage of a certain small amount of people, right? And I don't know. So, think about this, right? So, if they don't work with 90% of people, and we'll just say, oh, 10% qualify for a mortgage and they actually get it, take a look at this. What is the percentage of millennials that regret buying a home in 2024, right? 90%. 90%, right? So it's like only 10, they've excluded the 90. They only need to work with 10, and then within that 10% that actually buy a home, only a 10% of that will actually be satisfied with it. And we all know the biggest reason for regret for buying a home, because let's say you got your dream home for $1, right? Like dream home for $1, I don't think anybody would ever regret that. Whereas if that home was taking up more of your half of your paycheck, now that home becomes an alligator or a nightmare, right? And I think for what happens with a lot of people, because again, these are people who probably make good incomes, and you've seen the videos about the broke doctors and the broke nurses. Those are the people that the banks essentially take advantage of. And I don't know if you ever heard the saying that banks don't lend money to people who need it. Okay? So take a look at this right here. Denied in distress, half of applicants have been turned down for a loan or financial product since the Fed began raising rates. Okay? So a lot of people get turned down, and banks aren't just going to loan to everybody. They want to loan to people who have money but are kind of slightly bad at managing it, right? Right? So, and I always make this comparison. It's kind of like big pharma, where if you're a big pharma, your ideal client is not the healthiest person in the world because they're never going to take your pill, and it's not someone who's really sick and is going to die tomorrow because they're not going to take your pill. It's someone who's kind of healthy but is kind of bad at managing their health. And the prime like demographic of this is actually children, right? Like children are kind of like your target demographic, and that's why they always try to like push like those mental anxiety drugs to children nowadays because um, they fit the criteria, right? They're pretty healthy. Most children are at the prime, they got a lot of life force, and then that they're not. Most of them aren't going to die tomorrow. Okay, so you just feed them that pills and they become a consumer for life. That's how the banks are. I mean, think of that 30-year mortgage. It's like a 30-year parasite, right? But they're not going to give that 30-year parasite or try to make money with that 30-year parasite off of most of the population. It's a very small percentage of the population. Now, I'm not saying be a parasite like the bank. What I'm saying is that if they're not willing to work with 90% of the population, that's a message that you should take into heart, that you have to have standards and not want to work with most people. Because if you work with most people, you'll end up broke. Crazy to think about, right? And how do I know this is because every time I've lent money to people that was on an emotional basis and not based on, let's say, a criteria that a bank would have, again, Banks don't lend money to people who need it. So I lent money to people who need it. And guess what? Did I get paid back? Nope. Nope. And if the big old institution of the bank can't even tolerate, people like that, how are you as an individual going to tolerate people like that? You can't. So you got to have standards and not want to work with most people, right? And this is probably the opposite advice you've heard um, growing up, because what do they tell you? Oh, go to college, meet all types of people, be open to everything. No, no. You have that attitude, you're probably going to end up broke. And again, most people are broke, right? It's not a correlation that banks have standards and are selected. I mean, and I'm at Bank of America's website right here. Say, hey, these are what we're looking for, and most people don't meet the criteria. But they don't have to be rich. I'm sorry, they don't have to have most people to meet the criteria in order for them to be rich, right? And that's something that we don't really think about. We think, oh, we got to apply to everybody, anybody. No, that's not true. Have standards. This is also true as a landlord too. Have standards and don't work with most people. You want to rent my house? It's a privilege. Same thing with the bank. You want to get a mortgage? That's a privilege, right? You have that attitude. You have standards. One day, and again, it's not me yet. We'll probably have the tallest buildings in downtown North America, even though I probably don't want that. All right. All right. Well, that's it for today. Today's life lesson. Was it? Where are we? Number 4, number 5. I gotta make a playlist for this. But again, banks don't work with 90%, or they don't, 90% of people don't qualify for a mortgage in this country. 90%? Is that crazy? And you might be thinking they should give mortgages like cars, like Oprah gave out cars. And then they won't have, and then once they do that, they won't have the tallest buildings in North America anymore. Or they'll just be bailed out, right? Too big to fail. All right. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Have a great day, and we will speak next time.